The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. I'm Senator Kevin Avard. I represent District 12 here in New Hampshire, and we're getting into the political season. Session's over, and now comes the primaries and election time. So get ready. And today I'm going to be interviewing on our show a former Alderman, Mr. David Schoneman. Schoneman, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Senator. Glad to be here.
I'm glad that you are here. It's going to be an interesting year.
It certainly is.
So rumor has it that you got an exploratory bid out for Senator Lasky's now retiring, and You're considering on running for her seat?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
So we've launched an exploratory committee, a PAC that we formed a couple of weeks ago, with the idea of taking a very careful look at this race and what we think our options are, our chances are. We've got a lot of good support so far. We have a lot of encouragement from folks who have said that they like the representation that I brought to them as an alderman, and that they feel dissatisfied in certain respects with the representation they've had up in Concord. A key thing to the way that I ran and succeeded, I think, as an alderman was on representation, really trying to make life better every day for the folks in Ward 3. And that was simple things often. It'd be a pothole or a stop sign or trash collected or snow plowing. But these are the things that make a difference for folks. And I think it's that level of service that I think made me succeed or had me succeed as an alderman. And it's that level of service I want to see us have in Concord too.
And you served 2 terms?
2 terms, yes.
2 terms, great.
2013 to 15 and 15 to 17.
A little bit about your background. Where do you hail from, if you will?
Well, I was born and raised in Chicago, and we moved out to New Jersey when I was in junior high school. So I grew up on the East Coast, went to college in Pennsylvania at Lehigh University, and after college graduation I worked in New York City for a couple of years, right across the street from the World Trade Center, by the way.
Wow.
So I went through the basement of the World Trade Center commuting to work every day, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. But then I moved to Boston, and I had friends from college up here who encouraged me to come up, and it was a great city. I enjoyed it a lot. Went to BU for a graduate degree. I have an MBA. I graduated in 1987 with an MBA.
In what field?
Finance, operations management. So I worked in various industries trying to find a good fit. Ultimately, I changed careers and went into the aviation field. So I'm now a flight instructor. I became a corporate pilot for a while. It's one of those things that I think it's important to pursue your dream.
You're a pilot.
I'm a pilot.
Well, you're going to be happy with the bill that we just passed.
I'm very happy with that bill you just passed.
The governor's actually going to be signing it, I believe, either the 18th or the 21st. I'm hoping he goes for the 18th. But this is a long time coming, Nashua Airport and registration fees. There were actually 2 bills that were there, and I know I co-sponsored one of them, but we definitely made sure that this passed the Senate, and voila.
We really, really appreciate all your assistance on that. It was huge. In fact, I was up in Concord testifying before the House committees on this legislation because
I didn't see too many other people from Nashua testifying on this.
There were a few people. I didn't come to the Senate side, but they did come to the House side. I think that maybe we thought once we got through the House, we had clearer sailing in the Senate, perhaps. But the House was a bit of a battle. We weren't really sure where it was going to go. But in the end, it did come out of committee very, very strong in favor. I think there was only one person who voted against, at least in the Ways and Means subcommittee that Representative Abrami chaired. And that's where I testified. And we also had a resolution out of the Board of Aldermen that I helped to author to get the Aldermanic Board and the mayor on board with petitioning Concord to pass this legislation because it's good for business.
Oh, it's good. It's part of our infrastructure, and it just the ripple effect, if you will. If we can encourage more planes to be registered here in New Hampshire. It makes no sense what we were doing.
Well, what happened was, if you go way back to the point where Massachusetts was charging a 5% sales tax on a $50 million aircraft, that'd be $2.5 million sales tax bill. And Nashua, or New Hampshire, by comparison, had a registration fee that was higher than theirs, but it was much lower than their tax.
Okay.
So registration fee might have been $300,000 for that same airplane for the first year, compared to a $2.5 million bill for sales tax in Massachusetts.
Right.
But along the way, Massachusetts, of course, they have their sales tax holidays periodically, and you can buy a refrigerator or whatnot down there without sales tax on the course of a weekend. Well, they discovered in aviation that they could really make some money, really draw business, if they declared a permanent sales tax. So Massachusetts declared a permanent sales tax holiday on anything to do with aviation. So now the tax on that $50 million jet is zero. It's zero. And the registration fee on that $50 million jet in Massachusetts is $300. Here, it was $300,000. And so they wised up and wanted to compete with us. And as Representative Abrami said, they're eating our lunch, because they went from $2.5 million down to $300, and we're still at $300,000. We just fell asleep, really, and without making the change.
People were hanging on to that. Yeah, we're gonna lose our airport. No, folks, you're losing market share
Absolutely.
at a breakneck speed. So.
Yes.
This was a positive effect. The governor's going to sign it, and
Yeah.
there'll be a ceremony for that, and hopefully you'll be there.
I'll be there. I'll be there, and the folks at Nashua Airport are very, very grateful for that, because we did spearhead that effort, I think, trying to bring it to the forefront, and we're very pleased with what you've done.
And kudos to the airport, because they gave us tours and to let us know what was going on, and unless we know, we're not going to be able to do anything. So. And that's not just going to affect our airport, but others as well.
Oh, of course.
And so it's a wonderful step forward.
It is.
A lot of good bills like that. So you got a background in finance, and were you in support of the cap here in Nashua?
Yeah, the spending cap, I think, is a very important protection for the taxpayer. People talk about tax rate. Tax rate's important, but tax rate can be manipulated based on a lot of factors. A lot of things go into the tax rate. But when you come right down to it, if you can limit spending, if you can control spending, then ultimately you're going to control taxes.
Okay.
And we've had a spending cap here in Nashua for about 20 years, 20 some odd years, that was authored by Fred T. Boom way back in the day when he was an alderman. And it was in response really to some of the spending that then Mayor Donches had initiated at the time. And to protect the taxpayers against rampant spending, a spending cap was put into place. And basically what it says that you take last year's spend, or last year's appropriations, and then gross it up by an inflation factor.
Right.
It's consumer price index, urban, just all kinds of other factors that go into it, but it's a percentage. So it's last year's number plus the percentage of last year's number to bring it up to an extra 1.5% or 2%, 3%, whatever the number happens to be for that year. So I'm very much in favor of keeping that cap, because limiting spending will ultimately protect taxpayers.
Now, is it possible that we've skirted the cap here recently?
We have skirted the cap. In my view, we've skirted the cap.
And how have we done that?
Well, you take last year's appropriations and you add that percentage. Now, if you can change the formula to take something out of that appropriation and put it into a different fund, the number hasn't really changed. So in this case, we took $9 million out, and so they filled it up with $9 million more of spending, plus the percentage that could be applied. So really, spending didn't go up by the 1.5% or 2%, whatever it was. It went up by a much larger number, around $10 million, let's say, because it was that $9 million plus, maybe it was $12 million.
And now we have a lawsuit. There's
a lawsuit. And Fred T. Boom has been to the Supreme Court before to defend the spending cap, and he succeeded. And he's taken this through the court process, and he and former Alderman Moriarty are going to be taking their case to the Supreme Court this time, too.
So they have standing.
They have standing.
But apparently in history, the taxpayers in 2010, 2012, and 14, the lower court said that they don't have standing to file a suit if their local officials do not basically obey the ordinances that the people instituted.
Right, it's very important.
So in the wisdom of the House and in the Senate, we passed a constitutional amendment that's going to be on the ballot this year, CA-CR 15, which is going to give the people the right to sue. If your local alderman or selectman or if any of them decide to go outside the bounds that the people said and start spending like crazy, this will give them the opportunity in court to have a standing. I'm a taxpayer. I want accountability.
Right.
And I assume you support that.
I absolutely support it. I think it's very, very important that government has to be responsive to what people want. And this is what self-government's all about. It's not that we vote in the people that are going to be our dictators.
Right.
That's not what we're doing. We're voting in people that are going to represent us, act on our best interest, act on our behalf. And to the extent that that government doesn't do that, the folks at home really do need to have some mechanism, some recourse.
Right.
And
It's demoralizing when they feel as though they're not being heard. Completely. I found it interesting. There were only about maybe 5 or 9 people on the House side that voted against it, and I think it passed unanimously in the Senate side. There'll be another constitutional amendment on privacy as well, and in allowing individuals to have privacy. Those are a couple of issues that basically I think are very important, and at least they'll have an opportunity to vote on that. So you're potentially running, you're looking at it, and I've heard some people say, well, this is a Democratic area, but I believe it wasn't too long ago that Senator Gary Lambert,
Yes.
a Republican,
Yes.
a moderate Republican, conservative moderate, he basically went out and he showed that it can be done. You think it can be done?
I do think it can be done. If we look at politics or government, whether it's local, state, or national today, we see a lot of division, a lot of divisiveness, and I think there's just battles and a lot of rhetoric, and people don't like most people, whatever side of the aisle they're on, whatever their political affiliation is, I think are getting tired of that.
Right.
And to the extent that we can present that we're willing to work with folks on either side, that we live by principles, and one of those principles is the way we conduct ourselves.
Right.
I think that kind of message goes a long way, and I think it's winnable. The seat's winnable for a Republican like myself, because that's the approach I plan on taking.
You support trains?
Trains. I think that the Board of Aldermen supported the private rail that came in here. That was unanimously supported. That was the first presentation that came to the Board of Aldermen that really had any kind of substance. It wasn't just wishful thinking. It was an actual plan that someone was willing to come in and operate a for-profit rail. I fully support that. If we don't operate, if that fails for some reason, and I don't think we can really go down a different path until that path has been exhausted.
Sure.
The city is committed to following this for-profit path.
Yep.
And that's clearly the best one. The market research this company did and presented says that it's possible for that to succeed. I think that having the rail is a good idea, but if it can't succeed as a for-profit enterprise, I'm really worried about burdening the taxpayer with that. Now, should we do the study or not? Should we do the extra $4 million study? I think from Nashua's standpoint, we probably have to take a look and get all the information that we can.
Right.
So I can see supporting the $4 million study, but I don't know that my personal view is that the $4 million study is going to show us anything more than we already know. I think we already have enough information to decide let's do it or not. And unfortunately, the ridership numbers, I don't think, justify it. Now, maybe if we try the for-profit rail, we'll see that ridership numbers do justify it. Or maybe if Massachusetts brings rail up to the line, and they have to do that first, really. If they bring it to the line and we see that there's a park and ride there that's generating a lot of ridership, okay.
I've been talking to some of my colleagues that actually voted against rail, and I believe that if we can bring it up to at least the national line, and maybe help out.
Sure.
I think we can make some progress there.
I think so too.
I think I have some commitments, but we'll see what happens. I told Betty, Senator Lasky, so we're going to call it the Lasky Transit if we get it, because she's worked really hard on this. But one thing I find that in the Senate, you can get things done and you can work in a bipartisan way.
Good.
There is a lot of discomfort up there, a lot of snide remarks, a lot of backbiting. But I think when you get into the Senate realm, you'll see that people really do work together. And I've had a number of bills that were bipartisan, One was an energy bill, which I thought was, we're allowing, hopefully the governor signs it. It's SB 446, which basically allows net metering to go up from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts. And Nashua will definitely be able to take advantage of that, allowing, I think we have a 3 megawatt hydro system
Right.
up here. By taking advantage of that, it reduces our transmission load, reducing the cost and peak, and there's a whole host of other issues that go along with that. But that was won on a bipartisan level.
Good.
You know, and when you were able to reach across the aisle and look at the other person as a person first,
Right.
and I find that to be very easy up in the Senate.
Good. Glad to hear that.
And you'll have a good time once you're up there.
Okay, great.
But we hope to have you up there.
Well, we're going to try hard.
But working with others and making sure that you get something accomplished. You're not going to get 100% all the time.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And I think that's a reality that, as Jeb Bradley would say, you know, if everybody walks away angry, he's done his job. You know, if everybody gets a little piece of the pie, you know.
Right. Everyone has to have a little piece of the pie.
Right. Yeah. So, and we're glad that you're stepping up. So you've done 2 terms. Who did you work for? What company did you work for before you were an alderman?
Before I was an alderman, I was a defense contractor. I worked for a company called General Atomics.
Oh.
And General Atomics, in the aviation field, they make the UAVs that we read about all the time that are flying in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Predator and the Reaper.
Right.
They make those airplanes. And they also supply flight crews to the government and to the military for those airplanes. So I was a flight crew. I deployed to Iraq for 2 tours, 2 6-month tours.
Thank you for your service.
My pleasure. I was never in the military. I always want to say that to people. And as I got older in life, I realized I wish I had gone to the military. It would have been like to have been a Air Force or Navy pilot. I think it would have been great. But I didn't do that at the time. So this was a job that came along that would afford me that opportunity. So I had a chance to work with the Army. I deployed with the Army. I deployed with other civilians at times to various places.
And so you were in harm's way, pretty
We were
much.
in harm's way.
Yeah.
And there's something called indirect fire. I mean, no one was aiming a rifle at me. But when they shoot a rocket or they shoot a mortar into the camp, they're aiming at anyone who happens to be there. And so we were certainly targets of indirect fire. Nothing came real close, but sometimes I was sitting in a hut one time. We had chow halls were tents, and we heard these 5 explosions, one after another, boom, 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 and getting closer. They're walking them in. The last one that hit, we could hear the gravel raining down on top of the tent.
Yikes.
Where we were having our meal. You know, all forks stopped halfway up, and the place was just silent, and some people ran for the bunkers. But then it stopped, and one of the soldiers there said, "Don't worry, they got those guys."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they get 3 rounds off or 4 rounds off, and that's all they get. But, you know, that can happen. So you deploy, and I wasn't married at the time. Now I'm married. We have a little baby boy at home, Isaac, who is 19 months.
Congratulations.
So I'm not going to be going overseas.
Sure. My son
to
was
harm's way anymore.
My son deployed to Afghanistan, and you know, you don't breathe right until they come home.
Yeah. Where'd he go in Afghanistan?
Boy,
What branch is he?
he's Army.
Okay.
But he transferred to Mountain, and he was definitely in the mountains. And he was with the Guard, but he wasn't with the Army. They sent him with a whole bunch of Marines, and the Marines kept my boy safe.
Oh, good.
But they saw action, and he sent me clips, you know, and I made a little video, go on YouTube, Soldier Son. I wrote a song and sent it out to a whole bunch of churches and just asking people to pray for my son.
Good.
But he lost some of his friends there.
Yeah, that's terrible.
He's a sergeant now, and he runs the New Hampshire Honor Guard, basically. And so he takes it very, very serious. He wants to make sure that everybody gets the proper burial and respect that they deserve.
Yeah.
So, and all that serve, you know, my heart goes out to them. I was recently in a parade there where we're celebrating Memorial Day, and we celebrated John Singer, a 97-year-old World War II POW.
Wow.
Shot down on his 40th mission, and he told his story, and oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, so my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, we have a lot to be thankful for, and
Yeah.
that was one of the things I wanted to learn I wanted to go overseas, wanted to go to these bases and see what this was like, because I wasn't in the military, and we benefit so much as Americans from the sacrifices, whether the ultimate sacrifice or just sacrifice of someone being there. We really do benefit. We have freedoms that we wouldn't have otherwise. Because socialism is not worth fighting for, by the way, but freedom is worth fighting for.
Freedom is definitely worth fighting for. And I remember our first battle that I ever saw politically. I just became a Christian around 15 years old, and Tabernacle Baptist Church was, they had a school. It was a Christian school back then. And the local authorities were going to zone it out, not allowing them to have the Christian school there, zoning laws. And I remember the battle. And that was when I became very aware politically. And I was only 15 years old. And back then, school choice was an issue. And they won, because it is a right. It is a civil right, you know, if for the churches or for, you know, religions or wherever you want to build your schools and to teach your youth. And that seems to be a battle that has continued ever since. Is this whole idea of school choice. What are your thoughts about school choice and charter schools?
Charter schools and school choice. Charter schools, of course, are public schools. They're publicly funded schools. And the ones that we have here in Nashua, Academy for Science and Design.
Which is nationally known.
Nationally known. It's the best school in New Hampshire, best high school. At least has sometimes first, sometimes second, but very, very successful school. And it runs at a much smaller budget than the regular public schools. And I think that giving the kids a choice, I think it was Jeb Bush in one of the presidential campaigns came through New Hampshire and he was talking about school choice. He says, you can walk into a supermarket and you can go to the dairy aisle and you can find gallons, half gallons, quarts, pints. You can find whole milk, you can find skim, you can find 2%, 1%, you can find almond milk, you can find soy milk, you can find milk that's not made out of milk. Look at all these choices. Because that's America. This is we don't all think the same. You might like almond milk. I like whole milk, right? But whatever it is, we have these choices, and these choices are very important. The same thing applies to education. Not everybody is going to do well in a charter school. Academy for Science and Design, as good as it is, it's not right for everybody.
Correct.
But the main public school is not right for anybody either. And there's a great story actually came out of the Ledge Street School. Ledge Street School here in Nashua is one of the lowest performing schools in our district. And the district of Nashua is one of the lowest performing districts in the state, in the bottom third. So here's a student who's performing poorly in a low performing school in a low performing district. And whoever the parent or guardian of this child put in an application to the Micro Society Academy.
Which is right off Exit 5.
Right off Exit 5, another great school, elementary school. And that child won the lottery, essentially, because these schools admit based on a lottery. So this child, who was in a low-performing school, and a low-performing student in a low-performing school, went over to Micro Society Academy. And within 1 year, that student, part of that class, that entire class tested proficient in whatever their math or English, whatever it was. But 100% of the kids in that class tested proficient. So here we took a student who was languishing in the regular public school. They were given the choice, really, by parents or guardians who said, we want a better future for this child.
Sure.
And this child has a better future. And I think there are other students who might be in the same boat.
I was one of those kids. I got to tell you, I could barely read when I was in 6th grade. Barely read. And I just learned differently. I learned very audibly. I learned how to play my music audibly. And I have a little bit of dyslexia. So it was difficult for me to read music, but I was that kid.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why my heart goes out to it. And I've gone to a few events where, in Maryland and a few other places, where they were talking about this national movement with the charter schools and with school choice, not just charter schools, but school choice.
Yes.
Because globally, it's looking to take kids out of poverty,
Right.
and give them that hope. Look,
Right.
I don't learn well here. I learn this. I learn this way, or I learn this way, or I have a visual, or a hearing, or a very different outlook than the cookie cutter syndrome.
Right.
We have wonderful teachers in our public schools, and
do.
it's not an attack on them.
No,
and I
it's
hate
not.
that narrative, because that's not where it's at.
Right.
But it is about the kids.
It's about the
And
kids.
you can give that kid a little hope and let them learn that light bulb goes off, and the joy, the smile on their face, the enthusiasm, you just won.
You did.
And they just won, and they're going to be productive in our society.
I
But
agree.
I'm glad you brought up the micro society, because that's relatively new here.
Yep, and they're very successful. They're doing a great job.
They say on average, in order for a charter school to be successful, it's about 3 years for the curve for it to get into full gear. And we've gone to a couple of their ribbon cut-ins, which is great. We're all excited about it. But
Very exciting.
I'm glad that you're on board with that.
Yeah, I think charter schools are great. I would like to do everything we can to expand those opportunities. Charter schools are limited to how many students they can take by their charter.
Sure.
And I'd like to see those numbers increase. They would need a little more funding. So I'm all about funding those kinds of things. And choice, I think, is very important too, like we spoke about. Not charters. I mean, charter schools aren't right for everybody, and regular public schools aren't right for everybody. But everybody, I think, can improve based on competition. The reason they're charter schools, I think one of the reasons they're so successful, is because they have to compete for the students.
Right.
And the regular public school doesn't. So in the regular public school, there's no move towards efficiencies really. We have declining enrollment, we have increasing costs. That's not a formula, that's not a picture of efficiency. So we need to have more efficiency, and I think we need to have somehow a better outcome. And I think the outcomes can improve with competition. That's how human beings function. We just work better if we have a goal to work towards, if we're competing for something.
So how can somebody get in contact with you about helping you out with your campaign? Or
I'd be very happy to have them come to the Facebook page.
Okay.
It's David Schoneman for NH State Senate. Facebook page, and you can friend us there, and you can get information there. You can contact us. That's the best way. We're going to have a website coming up pretty soon. We don't have that up just yet, but we will soon. So right now, the best way is Facebook, or you can email me, and that's david.schoneman. I'll spell it SCHONEMAN. david.schoneman@gmail.com.
Well, I'm very grateful that you came on the show. And
Thank
God
you very
bless.
much, Kevin.
I hope all things work out well. Knock the doors, meet the people.
We're going to do that.
Press the flesh, as they say. Kiss
That's
the
what
babies.
we're going to do, yeah.
I haven't kissed too many babies, but I do shake hands and knock a lot of doors.
Good.
So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching Speaking with the Senator. We hope that it's informative, and we'll see you next week. Until then.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.